All right, without further ado, let's get started. I'll close this chat box and we will watch this video. Let me know if you have any trouble hearing the video. It should work out. Let's see. Can you?
Hi, I'm Father Jim Martin. I'm author of My Life with the Saints, and I'm here today to talk about alms and joy. It may seem a strange topic. Giving alms is part of a Lenten tradition. Now, most people think about Lent as something, a time to give up things, to abstain from things. But, you know, people fast from different foods. They might give up chocolate. They might give up soda, something like that. But, you know, originally, those fasts were not only to help us detach ourselves from material needs and remind ourselves that we're not just material beings, you know, solely, but also to save money. So the fasting, you know, if you didn't eat meat, you would fast and save the money and give the money to the poor, right? But I think we've sort of lost that idea, and Lent has become just about giving things up. So I think almsgiving can be a really nice way of recovering that tradition of generosity. Now that really leads to joy. Why is that? Well, a couple of reasons. When you give away something, you're going to be freer, and so you're going to be more joyful. You're going to have more freedom in your life. Secondly, when you give something away, you are following what Christ has taught us. You're following what theologians call praxis, the actual practice, putting into effect Christian teachings, which brings us joy, brings us closer to Christ's desire for us to live the good life and to help others live the good life. And third, we give to people and we make them joyful. So we make the whole community, the body of Christ, of which we're a member, more joyful. So I think this Lent, it's good to think about not only giving up chocolate, right, but actually being generous to people and giving alms. And in that almsgiving, we can experience some joy during Lent. So with my prayers for a lovely Lent, I'm Father Jim Martin, author of My Life with the Saints. Thanks a lot.
So I chose that video because I think it is just a nice reminder of what we can gain from Lent as we head into the Lenten season. I had the great privilege growing up going to a Catholic school for 5 years with some wonderful dynamic nuns and Father John, who is still practicing and recently had a men's prayer group with my dad and one of my dad's good friends. He's a dynamic guy heading towards 90. And he's remarkable. And when I was growing up, Lent was a time we talk about giving stuff up, but also giving out. It was a giving to others. It was a very much an active season. Father John would put the cross on our hands, so all day we'd have to look at it. Then I got into some hygiene issues with small children, but he said to us children, if you just have it on your forehead, you're just looking at other people. He said, I want you to think about, this is about you. This is about your reflection of what you're going to do with the time that you've been given. And that has meant more to me as I've gotten older and become a mother and an aunt and a teacher myself. So it's a wonderful time of year. So it's a challenging time of year. And so it's an interesting conversation we can have today about what this means as Catholics, what this means as people of faith, women of faith, and how we want to share that with others. Let's see if it will let me. There we go. Okay, so when we met with Kristen last time, or when Kristen shared her thoughts, she reviewed the idea of a Catholic identity. She talked about how that can be brought into our schools, into our professional learning communities. And I'm going to turn that just a little bit into this idea of cultivating a Catholic community, because I am of the mindset that this is something that has to be cultivated and cared for and managed, and it's an active living thing. You can't just plug in and plug it, check in and check out, plug in when you want to. You either are part of it or you're not. You have to be part of it all the time. And so what does that mean to cultivate it? It's a challenge. It's hard. Preparing for Lent and Ash Wednesday is also going to be part of our conversation, what this will mean to the school children. And then some housekeeping items I had mentioned before. So I taught in Texas. You can actually see it over my shoulder here. These are my crosses. When I taught in Texas at a parochial school, my students would give me these crosses. And I actually have a few more too. And I didn't, you have them here in Texas, it may be in Florida too, in Arizona, you have the cross wall. right? It becomes like your collection. And being a Great Lakes girl, I'd never seen such a thing. I'd never seen so many crosses, but it's wonderful to display this. And so when I started working at the Roche Center, I pulled this out of my storage because I wanted to be able to display this, because this is about the community I had with my students, who some of whom are now going to college. One is going to be coming to college not far from here in about 6 months, which is just crazy. I taught her in 3rd grade. So it's, and one of these crosses is from her, this one right here. So what this means in terms of displaying our faith and being part of our faith. And Anna Gray is joining us. Welcome, Anna. Can you hear me? She's coming online. We're glad you're here, Anna. So I'm going to pause there. Any thoughts thus far? Any thoughts on what Father Martin shared with us in the video? Any thoughts on sharing our faith and being active in our faith, particularly at a time of Lent?
Well, here at Holy Rosary St. Richard School, we kind of take the Lent very serious. We started with forgive me, but this is a word that is very hard for me to pronounce. This is the Shove Tuesday.
Shrove Tuesday.
Exactly. So the children made signs, Alleluia signs in the classrooms, and they all make like a little parade to the church that day, and everybody singing different tones of Alleluias, and then we my 2nd grade teacher is always in charge to show a video of what Lent means and what we can do for Lent. And then we pray, have a little liturgy, and then we put all the Alleluia signs inside of the big box that is a purple, and they put all the Alleluias, so they follow all the Alleluias, they roll all the Alleluias, and they put it over there.
I
When
like.
we come back from Easter,
Yeah.
we open the box and we sing all the Alleluias.
Yeah, you bring it out again.
Lovely.
That's
Love.
fantastic.
That's right.
I like that tradition.
And this year we're going also to give the Lamb of God. I actually asked the teacher, my team leaders, what project they think would be good for the children to encourage the giving, and they we put different options like the rice bowl and other options, but they decided Pennies for Heaven, which we do for Christmas, but they decided to go for this project, which is the first time that we have it. And in this side you see the Lamb of God, and in the other side you see spaces for little spaces for it says like quarters, but the children can put quarters, dimes, pennies. We encourage them to any coin, and one every day.
I like that.
Until Holy Week.
Yeah. And then you collect those?
Until Holy Week. Yeah. And we are partners of the Family Homeless Shelter that is south of our school. And for Christmas, we prepare activities, Christmas cards for them, and different things. For Valentine's Day, we prepare, all the students bring ham and cheese, or they prepare, well, this year happened to be in Ash Wednesday.
Right, so no ham.
Ham, cheese. We do it the day before, and we take it over there. So all the money that we're going to collect from the Lamb of God, we are going to also give it to them.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Yeah.
They'll be very much appreciated, I'm sure.
Yeah.
I love that. And it's very tangible.
Yeah, and we also have confessions for Lent. 3 of our priests come and offer confessions to all the students. There's some that they don't attend, they don't go to confession, either because they are not Catholic or just because they don't want. But we offer the confessions for Lent.
That's very good. That's an aspect I think probably gets them to think very deeply.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
it's easy to put the penny in. But...
We offer confession twice a year. One is for Lent, at the beginning of Lent,
Mm-hmm.
and the other one is at the beginning of Advent.
I like that. That's very good. Thank you for sharing that, Ninette. Lots of good ideas there.
You're very welcome.
Very good. Now, Anna, welcome again. I think you can hear me. Miss Gray? Maybe she can't. Okay, that's all right. Sister, do you want to share anything from St. Matthew's?
I would love to. It sounds like a lot of Catholic schools are just very participative in their day-to-day living. As I'm listening to you, it just reminded me of things we have done here since the beginning of school. You know, just being active Catholics and calling them to it, making them more conscious of it is a very strong thread in this school. We have, you know, kids who are in hospitals at times, and people write good, you know, wishing cards. We have people who, you know, die, and then depending upon if we know them all, we attend the funerals and that. I mean, so we attend the sad things, but then we also support the happier things. Like when you were talking about Lent and the Rice Bowl, we have a water project that we do the War and Pennies, and that donation goes to my congregation, which is the Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur. And we work in Africa, and we have this water project in Congo and Kenya and Nigeria. So I've been going around to the classrooms, giving them an idea of how dirty the water is, and how we, Sisters of Notre Dame, work with Procter & Gamble to get these 10-cent packages that help purify the water, and how the process helps the kids stay healthy, go to school. You know, just that whole idea that just with clean water, we can be in solidarity, not just with giving money, but knowing we're helping kids get a good education like we're getting here or in any Catholic school. So that's just one thing we do here. Another thing, when Father was talking about Lent, it just reminded me so much of, thank God for Vatican II. Because at Vatican II, we were a suffering people. We were just dying. And
spiritually and emotionally and congregationally.
Exactly. So with Vatican II, we're looking at Lent as, okay, yeah, it's a time to evaluate who I am, what I'm doing. Am I close to God? Am I far away from God? But a time to return if I wish. But then there's also that point of, you know, okay, if I'm giving up, I'm really hungry and I do want that burrito, then buy two and give the one to the homeless, you know, or buy one and say a prayer and give it to the homeless. You know, it's just creative ideas of how to be in solidarity with those who are suffering. And as he said, bring ourselves joy and bring others joy. There's a great paper I found, and it is on Lent, but it talks about fasting, but from the standpoint of Vatican II. So we are fasting. Are you fasting from meat, or are you fasting from gossiping about your good friend? Are you fasting about, you know, not swearing? Or are you fasting by letting somebody come in front of you in the long line? You know, just turning it completely around and coming up with the paper, but then letting the kids go further on it and make it personable. We're working on the spiritual works of mercy and the Catholic social teaching prior to this time, to kind of tend to weave it all through Lent. We're reading some great books that talk about God in a different way, and a forgiving God and a loving God for junior hires. One is Heaven is Real. If you're teaching junior high, anyone, but that's a great book. And then for 8th grade and for high school is The Shack. It's a great book that opens the eyes of God in a different way.
Did that become a movie?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. I know what you're talking. Yes, it's very powerful. I'm hearing from friends of mine.
Yes, and it's very, very And then there's Chocolate for Lent. I don't know if you've done that one, but that's a group study where, oh, it's just beautiful. It just, again, reinforces Vatican II theology about Lent. So those are some things that I'm using personally in my classroom, along with the curriculum, of course, from the diocese that they've given us that works with, you know, the knowledge of faith and the liturgical year and the moral education, which we always work in, prayer life, community, and service, and then always going out. You know, it's just not about me and my relationship with God. It's going to the world.
Right. And that's actually, if I may, sister, that ties in very much into what we're going to be talking about in a little bit, in a few slides, actually, because that is how I was raised to view Lent, because my nuns were sisters of Notre Dame of Namur. And so, like, this idea, you are just part of a larger community. And if you don't participate in that community, you're not really in the community. If you're not giving and sharing your gifts, what's the point?
Exactly. I have gifts, but they aren't for me.
Right.
Know?
Right.
Yeah.
They were not given to you just to hoard. You have a duty. You have an obligation to give to others.
Yes.
So it's a lifelong lesson. It's always stayed with me. So
Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur.
I believe so. Yes.
Where would you? May I just ask where you were educated?
I was educated in Ohio, but they were based in Michigan. Does that sound right?
No, we are in Cincinnati, Ohio. That's where our mother house is.
Well,
there are Sisters of Notre Dame, and there are many branches. But
so
we're
maybe
from
it's a different branch,
which is in Belgium, and our mother house is in Cincinnati. But you also do have sisters in Toledo, who is our cousin, and we have other branches. But the basic is God is good, and St. Julie Billiard founded the educational congregation and helped 3 other congregations get started. So I'm sure it's all connected.
I'm sure you need to come to the academy so we can talk about this more.
Oh my Lord, may it be so. But I'm going to Peru. I'm going to Peru this summer.
Peru,
so,
Boston. It's hard to tell.
Espanol.
See, and Anna, I don't want to leave you out of the conversation because I know you can hear us, but if you want to type anything, if you prefer that way, please go right ahead and I will read whatever you feel like typing if that's easier for you. Or you can talk if you can, I don't know. So I think in many ways, philosophically, we are aligned. Oh, here she goes. She says, okay, thank you. Very good. So I think we're in alignment in the way we think about this. And now let's challenge ourselves a little bit. So the idea of being a Catholic, this is, I wish I could take ownership of this picture. I did not take this picture, but it is the island that a lot of my family is from on my father's side. And when I think about being Catholic, I think about this island, the good, the bad, the complex. It's an island off of Ireland. And it's, when I think about, to me, it's this idea of like you do pilgrimage up a mountain to honor St. Patrick. There are churches there that have been there hundreds of years that my ancestors would go to. They're built from the stone that they pulled out of the beach and put on. This is just, it's part of this idea of being in communion with both my family and my community. And also I just really like the picture, and it's good to every once in a while to have like calming pictures, right? And forest bathing, to borrow the idea from the Japanese, and just to take ourselves out of the everyday busyness. And I see that as being part of Lent too, to take ourselves out of the everyday business of life and to reflect, and take the time to reflect, and to teach our students and children to reflect. So Kristen asked us to think about, how do we strengthen the Catholic identity? How do we strengthen our experience as Catholics? And in her webinar previous to this, part 1, she was challenging us to think about what this means to have a Catholic identity, and understand that some of our colleagues might be coming from a different tradition, may have walked away from the Catholic identity, may be going through the motions of a Catholic identity, but need to reflect on it. I want to pose these questions to you, if you'd like. Is there anything you'd like to share about these sentences, these questions from Kristen? How do we strengthen it, and how do we strengthen our experience? They're big, lifelong questions, but it's good to pause and think about it.
One thing for me is being aware of what my Catholic identity means. Just, we're all Christians, but I'm a Catholic Christian. So helping the students understand what that means, and then going with and promoting the old saying, what would Jesus do? Due to our Catholic faith and our commitment to Jesus, because there are two things there, two caminos, two paths.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So really making sure that our kids understand what our Catholic, ¿cómo se dice? Anyway, our identity as Catholics, what does that really mean?
Right.
And then how is it expressed through our tradition and rituals?
Mm-hmm.
And then going into the what would Jesus do via our Catholic identity?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nanette or Anna, I want to give you a chance. You can pass too if you'd like to. These are, I don't think there are any definite answers. And I see we have someone on the phone as well. I don't have a name, but welcome. Please feel free to jump into the conversation.
Well, when I say Catholic identity, it's really special to me because actually I have my leadership degree happened to be in specifically for Catholic schools. So we during those 3 years we really were able to share with other leaders the meaning of Catholic identity. I also, it takes in my mind the first summer academy that we did over there at Boston with Patty. Mm-hmm. And how Patty and Kristen help us to modify, create, reform, or do whatever was needed to make our mission statement more accurate, more specific about who we are. And obviously, the meaning of Catholic identity came in place and is in our mission statement. We're Catholics. So during these years, and in our relation with Boston College, and in our also, it's because it's in everywhere. I mean, I can tell you. I happen to have my two different evaluations from quality analysis. Mm-hmm. The first and the second was just to evaluate in the two phases. They just evaluate the part of that was evaluating the Catholic identity of the school.
Okay.
We really look like we are Catholic. Anyway, yes, it is here, but at the same time, it's always challenging. For example, I had a meeting with my pastor, and my pastor is now looking to help families from the school to from the church to give them the incentive that if they are part of the church, they help them with some type of scholarship.
Okay.
Okay, but we don't have that. Other schools here have it for many years. We did it, and then for one of another reason, we stopped doing that. And he mentioned it that, oh, it looks like now the school is like a private school, not a Catholic school. It's not a parochial school, because we are in one campus, the parish is in another campus, and you the question of the marriage. So yes, we have been challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And Richard has been challenging in relation to identify us as a parochial school, as a Catholic school. But I think at the end, it's something that we keep in mind. And it's part of our tradition. Our school has been founded in 1959.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we are carrying the tradition of the Catholic identity in the school. But at the same time, as you say, we also need to be aware that we have challenges from this century that we need to present. Either because the documents of the church, Pope Francis. So we have been trying to incorporate those ideas and those principles and to the life of the school.
I think you bring up some excellent points, Nanette, that I want us to be cognizant of, not just for this conversation, but for the academy and going forward, that many of the schools are not physically near their home parishes. They are maybe not near any parish. The Catholic school that I went to actually was considered an independent Catholic school, but they had a chapel. So how do you keep your Catholic identity present when you're physically removed from the church building itself?
Exactly.
It's a challenge. It's a legitimate physical daily challenge to not just become a non-public school. You're more than just a non-public school. So it's a matter of identity. It's a matter of affiliation. It's an interesting challenge. These are not easily resolvable questions, but it's good to strengthen our thinking muscles this way, our reflective muscles, because we need to take the time to think about them. And we can do that through prayer. We can set aside the time in prayer. We can push ourselves to do original prayers. That's what Kristen was asking us to do, to not just go through the rote prayers that we are very familiar with, which sometimes can be very comforting. For me, there's a comfort in the words are so familiar. The rhythm of it, it's very expected, saying with the whole community, it's very familiar. But we can also push ourselves to go through more reflective prayer, thinking about our daily challenges. And that includes, using methods such as that which comes from St. Ignatius, the Examen. I'm going to mute, I hear someone's phone ring, so please forgive me. I'm going to just mute some things here. But feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to say anything. So this 5-step prayer, it's meant to be just to get us into the rhythm of daily prayer. Meant to be quick, not meant to be arduous in any way. 15 to 20 minutes, 5 steps. I have a friend who is a Buddhist nun, and they do something very, very similar to this. And it's like an exercise, daily morning exercise for the mind and for the soul and for the spirit and for one's identity, personality, something beyond our work or our family life or our neighborhood life, something that's special to us and ourselves, and to maintain and cultivate this relationship with the Lord and with our faith. So this is something that I actually started doing a version of this years ago through an Irish Jesuits website. Every day they'd have a prompt in your inbox. Okay, today we're going to spend 5 minutes thinking about this wonderful blessing, or we're going to think about this wonderful blessing. And it was great. It was hard. It was hard to make sure I set aside the time, even 5 minutes, for that activity. But it pushed me to grow as a person. So how do we make sure we share that with our students to make sure they set aside the time for something that's nothing to do with their physical lives maybe, but something to do with their spiritual inner life, who they are as people? So related to that, Kristen referenced this blog post, and the link is here. So later when you want to click on the link or review this with your colleagues, the link will be here. So along with Father Rodney O'Dwyer of St. Louis University, Kristen wrote this letter to parents of young children about raising children in a spiritual, faithful manner in a world that does not set a lot of time aside for that. And they talk about a lot of different topics, from screens to the busyness of children's lives, and making some choices. Kristen is a mother, and Father O'Dwyer has worked with students, and they're also trying to do this in the spirit of the document for the Congregation of Catholic Education. They're trying to root this in that tradition. It's worth taking a look at it. It's, of course, just because she's my colleague, but also because it really touches upon some very important topics that we may not make time for in our professional lives that we might need to. And we speak usually to our students, but maybe we need to speak to their parents, their aunts, their uncles, their grandparents who are part of their lives. Are they making time for this for the children? It's a choice that families must make. Kristen talked about being busy, the busyness of parenting. And those of us who are parents will find that to be very familiar. But carving out time to say, I'm not doing anything. We're not scheduling anything for 2 hours this weekend. We're going to spend time together doing nothing, which makes my children frantic, actually. But to set aside the time to, like, we're going to go to church, and we're just going to, even just sitting there, even if we're just sitting there and just letting it wash over us, is important. But usually my kids love going because they see their friends, they see folks they may only see once a week because these are special church friends. The expectations are different, and it's warm and welcoming, and that's important too. Okay, I'm going to unmute you so that if you'd like to say something about this, you can before we move forward. I want to make sure if you have, and if not, that's fine too. Any thoughts?
I think, well, God talks two different ways, but I was talking to Father Sullivan, our pastor, and I was saying, we were reflecting about how poor attendance from our school parents it's the Sundays and the church. And I was telling him something like, Father, I think we cannot assume that because the parents enroll their children in Catholic schools, they really want to live their faith, and some of them, they really don't know the values. Some just ignore, their life set, take them here, take them there. Some of them are very young couples, they have their first child. Some of them are a little bit older, they have 2 children, but and I say, this maybe is the time that God is giving us to call them, and not to force them, but
right.
to call them.
Call them. I like that word so much. So I'll step out here in a minute, but of the people I grew up with, I'm one of the only ones to go to church, to baptize my children, to make them go to Sunday school. And for me, it does not feel like an obligation. It feels I feel compelled. I feel welcomed. It feels like a second home. And I don't exactly know why I got that and they didn't. Even those of us who grew up in the same parish or attended the same Catholic school, I think the idea of being called to it and being welcomed and making it feel like that the sense of hospitality, the importance of hospitality in our church spaces, our sacred spaces, is so important. And maybe that worked for me. Maybe someone made the effort, and hopefully I do that for others. But I think this idea of calling them in and welcoming and making it an extension of one's home and family is really important. It's not something they have. There's no the Baltimore Catechism, you must do that. No, it's more of like, this is where you need to be. We want you, we welcome you, we miss you.
Listening to you makes me think of our public schools.
Mm-hmm.
And the children who are Catholics can come to our parish for catechism. The parents of those children have to attend with their children, and then the children receive the class, and then the parents have a class. And we talk about these things that we're talking about today with the parents, putting the responsibility back on them to teach the faith. Just listening to you, I'm getting the idea it would be great if we made our parents, and I mean made, but invite them, encourage them to come to a meeting at the beginning of every liturgical changing. You know, like at the beginning of Advent, there's a school-wide parent meeting. You have to come and to feed them spiritually. Lent, there's another parent meeting. You have to come and give them something to reflect on, because they too are hungry for God. And they too are looking for guidance with children in a world today that is a lot of technology and little time, like you say, you know.
I think
But
that's a very important point. Yeah, they're hungry in lots of different ways.
So that idea just came from listening to you. I'm sorry, I don't know your Lozano.
That's Nanette Lozano.
Thank you, Lynette. Sorry. Okay, just because of what you're saying, and then again what Mary Bridget is saying, it's just stimulating other possibilities that we can do even more here. And we are doing a lot. We encourage parents to go to the website Pray As You Go, because that's Jesuits, and then the usccb.org, because you can click on the readings and listen as you're driving. I mean, it's just so simple, and then they have great reflections that really can touch the heart.
Yes.
So those are two things that we use with adults here at the school.
I think those are good suggestions, because it takes away some of the sense of burden. If they're just listening, they can do that anytime. I like that very much. Anna, or our friend on the phone, anything you'd like to share before we move forward? Okay. So one of the great stories that came from Kristen and Father O'Dwyer's letter. Pardon? Are we good? Okay, I think we're good. So there's a story that that Kristen shared. So I'll read it to you. A Catholic school models its community on the teachings of Jesus, not in a vague philosophical way, but in real terms, in very real terms. Last Thanksgiving, a custodian at a Catholic elementary school in Boston was paged to the school auditorium. Putting aside his dust broom, he made his way across the building to find the entire school assembled and anticipating his arrival. They stood and cheered as the principal directed him to the front podium. He was presented with notes and cards of gratitude from every classroom. The community celebrated the man with the dirtiest, hardest job, and the students received a timeless lesson from God's Spirit. Honor the dignity of all persons. The moment was a lived-out parable reminding us that the heart of community is connection to the least and to all. So Kristen was in her lesson, in her webinar, talking about service with knowledge. She was concerned. She shared an anecdote that her son, for instance, was going on a service trip, just a brief one in the afternoon with his classmates to celebrate Catholic Schools Week. And she was glad he was going, because it's great to give to others, but she was concerned that he could not articulate why they were going. And she said, why you and not the public school down the street? Why are you all doing this? She was nice to help people. And Thomas, her son, wasn't wrong, but there was a missed opportunity to educate on a bigger level and to understand why we're doing these things. And for her, and I agree with Kristen, that this is part of being Catholic, being active in our Catholic faith, to be living it out, living these parables, that we have to model it, we have to explain it. And I think that goes to what you were saying, actually, sister, that the parents might be attending the different things, especially those who have children in the public schools. They're sending their kids to CCD or PSR, what you call it there. They're going to the meetings, they're going through the motions, but are they doing this with knowledge, or are they doing this because that's the tradition? Are they participating because they feel a calling, like in Nanette's explanation, or are they doing this because it's just what you do? Now, there's, I think, some value in participating in church when you can, or doing nice things for others because it's the right thing to do. But service with knowledge means something else. And I think that goes to being an active Catholic, that you are active in your faith. Thoughts on this? Anyone like to share anything? And feel free to write in the chat box if you'd prefer, if that's your preference. Okay.
I just have to say we're doing that here at St. Matthew's.
Mm-hmm.
We're doing service projects, it seems pretty often, which is, just to make the kids sensitive to the people around us and to be active Catholics.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never heard the term service with knowledge, which I can appreciate.
Kristen's full of good phrases. She should have gone into marketing. She would have been a very wealthy woman, but she felt a calling to Catholic education and thinking about these things more deeply. It's hard to do. It takes a lot of effort. And to that end, a good friend of mine is starting her walk to Emmaus through her parish. She's in Texas. I used to live in Texas. And she's starting her walk to Emmaus, which means that every day starting tomorrow of this week, she's going to be at the church and going through a lot of exercises. She has a sponsor. She's renewing her faith in preparation for Ash Wednesday. And it's a big commitment. She's got small children at home, but she'll spend several hours every day, every evening, the rest of this week at church. And so we sent her messages, notes, letters, emails, encouraging her to keep going, make it to the end of the week, you're doing great. And it goes very much to this idea of what we felt, or what the followers of Jesus felt as he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us. And Kristen read us this passage from Luke last week, and this idea of walking Emmaus with the Lord and understanding what the faith means on a very deep level, even when everything seems to have fallen apart, even when it doesn't seem to have a meaning anymore. Here we can renew our faith. And these two phrases here, exploring our own faith, making time for our own spiritual growth. To me, it seems to be a deliberate choice that we have to do in this very busy world, this 24-hour news cycle, endless tweeting. Like, we have to find a way to step away from the pulls of the secular world and make time for our inner lives. I think our spiritual and cerebral lives. Otherwise, we won't cultivate it. It will not grow. It will not thrive. Thoughts on this?
I think it's absolutely important, as Christine expressed last webinar. The only way that we can have that relationship with God and be able to share with others his way is like doing it by prayer. And I know, and this is one of the things that I think is the beauty of having a relationship with God, is that it's not always emotional. It's not that you always feel like, oh, you are in heaven because you are doing prayer. No, sometimes, I mean, sitting over there and say, this is the time for God, and I have a lot of problems, and I have a lot of situations that I need my mind to put on, but trying to take aside either the problems or take the problems to talk to God about our problems, which is also prayer, I think is the beauty of being in a good relationship with God, as we do with any other person. I mean, God is a person.
It's a relationship.
It's relationship. You know, it's not that you always sweetie with your husband. You can have a beautiful. That doesn't mean that you are always in the same tone, and that I think is also that happen when you are fighting to be faithful in prayer. You know, so sometimes again you feel like, oh, I take the psalm and I really want to be like David. You know, but other times you feel like Mother Teresa in her darkest days. You know?
Well said. Well said.
And that's what I think is part of our journey.
Yes, exactly so. Exactly so, because it's going to change over time, because we're changing over time and our lives are changing. Well said. Beautifully said. So you're going to say that at the Academy, yes? Yeah. Right, Nanette? You'll share all this at the Academy?
Yes.
I think you said that very well. I think it was beautifully stated. Sometimes we're like David and sometimes we're like Mother Teresa. I like that. It's a good life motto.
Yeah. I have to say, reading books, which our 7th grade literature teacher does very well with our kids, really gets them into filling up their wells so that they can, fill up other people's wells. Mm-hmm. One book that she refers to often is The Tattoos of the Heart. And they just have so many great issues that makes the kids sensitive to one another, and just good reflections. And they always bring those things into the daily reflections that we do with the junior hires in the church. It's only a 10 or 15-minute meditation. But I think you're right. It's a matter of filling up our wells. Mm-hmm. I mean, however we do it, just to keep on with the mission.
To keep trying.
And I just think that's, I agree strongly with what you said. It's just important. And like you said, some days we're David and some days we're Mother Teresa.
See, it works. It works so well. I'm going to put you on the agenda, Ninette. You watch out. So, yeah. We've talked about Ash Wednesday and this idea of getting ready for Ash Wednesday. And Kristen asked us to encounter, move towards new people, new experiences. And Twin forces us to do this all the time in a very good way, because we're learning so much from each other. We have an opportunity in the Twin network to explore things in different ways that are very unique. We were just talking about this as a Roach Center, because there are many types of bilingual schools. This is not a novel concept. But the idea of a bilingual Catholic school is pretty unique in the United States. And one of the assets that we have is that we're thinking about language and culture and traditions in different ways that our Catholic counterparts in monolingual schools aren't doing, and that our non-religious bilingual school counterparts aren't able to do. It's a very unique mix, and we're very fortunate in that way. In the interest of time, unfortunately, I'm going to move a little bit faster. So some housekeeping before I forget. Speaking of our uniqueness and this idea of my friend walking to Emmaus, it just so happens that the Emmaus series, and this is true, she really is starting her Emmaus thing tomorrow, and the Emmaus series here at the Roach Center is opening this week. So if you or your colleagues are interested, not only do we have the Academy registration, which the principals know about already, we do need to hear from your schools if you haven't already registered. Several have, so thank you for those who have. But the Emmaus series, Emmaus Cohort 18, is opening. This is a very unique program and very rewarding for those who participate in it. It is a very thoughtful approach to developing leadership. So you may want to consider joining. Hello, Liz, welcome. And we've got our friends coming in from Omaha. Thank you. We're finishing up our 4 o'clock Eastern time, and we'll be starting our Central time in a few minutes. So we'll start at 5 exactly for our central time. I was just telling them, and you'll hear this again for those who joined early, the Emmaus series is a great opportunity for school leadership development for Catholic school leaders. So we hope you consider. And lastly, we have our second round of the book club. And I talked about this. There we go. Hopefully it shows up correctly on your screen. But teaching for biliteracy. Is this showing up oddly for you? Yeah, okay.
No.
Okay, good. On my screen it looks a little strange. But Teaching for Biliteracy by Beeman and Euro. I will be sending you more information. We talked about this at a couple other webinars, but we're going to go with it. Many schools already have the book, but they haven't looked at it in a couple of years. So this will be a refresher for some, new for others. It's not very big, but very, very useful. Lots of good bridging activities, because that seems to be something that several folks would like to try to explore more deeply. So I'll be sending information about this and we'll start reading it together. So we've had an excellent conversation about our faith and our uniqueness as Catholic schools. Thank you, Anna and Nanette and Sister and our friend on the phone who did not say, but we're glad that that person was there too. My phone people, I don't always catch, but we're really glad for that person for joining. So when they watch the recording later, they'll know. But thank you for your thoughts. Thank you for sharing.
Nice to meet you.
Yes, it was very nice meeting all of you, and thank you.
Bye-bye.
Please
Blessings.
be sure to complete the feedback in the chat. The link is in the chat.
Link is in the chat. And is that going to be on right now?
Yes.
So just stay on.
You can just click the link and I will take you to the form.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Blessings.